Welcome to the Trailblazer Talks podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Hope Wilson. This podcast is designed to encourage and equip you to be a trailblazer right where you are, to help you discover your God-given purpose and bring you talks each week that will inspire you to do what you were made for. Each week, we will walk through different topics to help you grow in your life, career, and leadership. My hope is that you'll become poised for purpose and walk in that daily. I hope each week you'll feel more equipped to be a trailblazer right where you are. So let's get into this week's episode. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode. This week we're wrapping up our series all about overconsumption and just the different effects that has on our lives and how we can have better boundaries and better routines and systems in place to kind of prevent this overconsumption mentality that's plaguing our culture. So the past few weeks we've talked about a lot of different areas with this, and I thought we could wrap this series up in talking about something related to overconsumption, and that's called overstimulation. And you may have heard this if you're a parent, because it's something that parents worry about a lot with their kids, making sure that they're not overstimulated, making sure that the types of shows that they're watching and things like that are not overstimulating them. But as I've been thinking more about this whole overconsumption topic that we've been talking about, I've also noticed that even adults can be overstimulated, that it's not just restricted to children. And I have a lot of friends who are moms, and I see their different content that they're posting about which TV shows their kids should or shouldn't be watching because of the effects of overstimulation on their developing brains. And that had me thinking, what about us as adults? Yes, our brains are developed, but we can still have overstimulation. And I feel like really through the pandemic, we've all been more than overstimulated through just having so many news pieces of information thrown at us constantly. The minute we're on social media, you're in tune with so many different things going on in the world, so much hurt, so much tragedy. And sometimes I worry that we aren't meant to consume that much information, that it can be harmful. And I think we're seeing the effects of that because of the rising rates in anxiety and depression. And I was doing a little bit of research to kind of better understand what even is overstimulation. And this is how I saw it defined online. It says overstimulation or sensory overload is when your senses are just completely overloaded with information, making it difficult or sometimes near impossible to fully process the information you're receiving. This type of overstimulation is often seen in what we call highly sensitive people. And I want to say to not everyone this doesn't just apply to people who are highly sensitive. This can apply to so many different people because overstimulation can happen whenever we are experiencing frequent screen time, whenever we are having too much of anything. It can cause us to become overstimulated. It can lead to poor mood and grogginess, headaches, dry eyes, watery eyes, and light sensitivity. If we spend too much time in front of our screens, we get screen fatigue. We are dealing with all these different effects of overstimulation. And it even affects our sleep as well. It affects our focus. There's just so many areas of this. And I was looking this up, and it said that the average screen time adults have per day is around 6 hours and 58 minutes per day. Is just an average. And for some people, that might be even more. And I would actually argue that it probably is more. Because if you think about it as adults, most of us work in the corporate world or on a computer of some type of computer. So if you think about, we're spending our day on our phone, going from our phone to our laptop, from our laptop to a TV, back to our phone or an iPad, whatever, it seems that more than ever, everything we look at is some type of screen. And then we're constantly filling every minute of our day with some type of noise, whether it's a podcast, which thank you for listening to my podcast, but whether it's a podcast or a TV show or music or a phone call or something like that, it seems that we we have trouble with silence, and we have trouble when we're not stimulated, that we just don't know what to do with ourselves. And this can be a real problem because before we realize it, we are becoming codependent on our devices. We're becoming codependent on all these different things to stimulate us, and we don't know what to do when we're bored or when things are quiet. And I've even noticed this in myself over the past couple years, especially since the pandemic. I was trying to see how much our screen time has increased since the pandemic, and it says that more than 60 to 80% from before the pandemic that we have increased our time with screens. And I can understand that because through the pandemic, we suddenly started using Zoom, and we started using all these video platforms and being connected, and a lot of us were by ourselves a lot of the time of the pandemic, so we were on our phones constantly trying to connect with people. But some of those habits and some of those codependencies are still following us beyond the pandemic into our normal everyday lives today. And I've seen that too whenever there's big news events going on. It's like you just can't turn your phone off, or you can't look away from social media. But I've also noticed myself being very tired and having a hard time going to sleep, and more likely to look at my phone right until I'm really sleepy, or look at my phone first thing in the morning to help me wake up, or throughout the day if I'm the least bit understimulated, it's like I have to look at my phone. And I started noticing these habits in my own life and realized man, I really need to correct this. I really need to work on decreasing my screen time and really kind of weaning off of this need to constantly be stimulated. And I've also recognized some of those signs that I mentioned earlier in myself with the grogginess and things like that. And so really all of this whole series kind of came out of things in my own life that I recognized that I was like, wow, I really need to work on this, because the way that culture is taking us is not healthy. And I noticed increased signs of anxiety in my own life and increased signs of depression in my own life at different times. And whenever I stop and think about it, a lot of it really is connected to how I'm living my daily life with being so ultra connected to my phone and screens and not wanting to sit in that silence. And this is something that I talked about a little bit on my Instagram in the past week or so, about why it's so hard for us to sit in silence and to be disconnected. It seems like, it can be so hard for us just to sit quietly these days. And it's like we are almost afraid of that silence at times. We don't want to be alone with our own thoughts, or have to deal with our own thoughts, or have to deal with what feels like perhaps loneliness at times when we're by ourselves and it's quiet. But I think if we can assess these things, if we can get the right boundaries in place around these different things in our lives, I think we can live such healthier and happier lives. We can hear God more clearly. We can be more in tune with the true needs that people have, and we can have more peace in our homes and in our hearts and in our minds. And so really, as we wrap up this series, I just want to challenge you guys to not be afraid to evaluate those things for yourself, to not be afraid to put some boundaries in place around your phone and around your screen time, and not be overstimulated, and recognizing those different things. I mean, I've recognized it with certain shows that I've watched, where if it's something really intense and very emotional, I feel so drained afterwards. Or if it's something that's very dramatic and very full of drama, I also feel drained. And it's not to say that you can't watch all those things, but I think we just have to evaluate how often and how much of those types of things we're watching, and even on our phones with social media, just how much we're being sucked into this online world where it affects the quality of life in our real world. So I think as we bring this to a close, a few things that I would advise us to do is, one, really evaluate the screen time on your phone, especially, that you are allowing yourself to have each week, and consider putting some boundaries in place with that, with the screen time limits on your phone. And something that I've had to do before, because even though I have put the screen time limits on my phone in the past, if I don't have a password that somebody else has, I will quickly override my own password if I know it, and give myself more screen time. and I'll come up with some excuse of why I need to do that. But I would advise you, if you can, if you have someone close in your life that you would feel safe to create a password with, is you can set a password on your screen time that's separate from all your other passwords. It's just your screen time password. But you can set that password and you can let somebody else be the one that determines what that password is, so that you can't override yourself with your own screen time. Me and my best friend actually used to do that before the pandemic. We used to do that, and then we both stopped doing it during the pandemic just because we both wanted to be able to feel more connected to everything that was going on in the world. But it's definitely something that I need to put in place even now. I need to put more screen time, phone boundaries on in my life as well. The other thing I would say is watch how much TV and how much video games or anything like that you do where you're connected to a screen. Really evaluate and take inventory of how many hours you're spending with those things, and really try to limit that and find other ways outside of a screen to stimulate, or to just sit quietly, or to spend time with God, or prayer, or meditate, or whatever, or just get outside more. I've been seeing these challenges of 1,000 hours outside, and I think that's so wonderful, and I wish that I could spend more time outside. And hopefully this summer I can, but working inside and living somewhere where I can't just walk outside, there's not really a sidewalk for me to go walking on. There's not really a safe place for me to go on walks by myself. It's definitely impacted me in where I used to go on a lot of what I call mental health walks, and not being able to do that as much has definitely affected me. It was really beneficial for me to get outside and go for walks and things like that. And so I'm hoping I can find a new way to implement that in the new place that I live. But I would definitely recommend that for you, is making sure you're getting more time outside, going for walks, doing things outside, playing pickleball or whatever. I think there's a difference in stimulation whenever it's our screen and it's this virtual world versus what I call our real world, going outside, playing pickleball or tennis or golf or whatever, or going for walks, or just sitting outside on your porch, whatever it may be. I think that can be so much healthier for us. And there's just so many health benefits too to being outside in the sunshine. I know for me, if I'm inside for too long and I've been on my screens too long, and then I go for a drive or something where I'm outside, I just notice an instant mood lift. So I think evaluate those types of things, and then recognize some of those different symptoms in your own life and how you're feeling, and take that as a signal of hey, I need to make a change. So those are some of the things that I would recommend doing in order to help overcome that overstimulation, to make sure that we are regulating ourselves better and that we aren't allowing ourselves to become so overstimulated that it's affecting our physical and mental health, to be honest. But I hope this series has been really enlightening to you. I hope it's been helpful. I hope it's challenged you to think differently about your own life, and to help you recognize maybe some of these unhealthy areas that are kind of taking over, because that's what culture is leading us to. And I hope that it can remind us that, especially as believers, we're not called to be like the world. We're called to be in the world and to shine our light for Jesus. And the way we do that is by fighting some of these different areas of our life that are making us numb to God's word and making us numb to God's voice, and just affecting us so harshly mentally that we can't even think straight. So I hope that you've listened to this whole series. I hope it's left you with some tidbits that can help you to really lead a more effective life and lead a healthier life, so that you can be fully present and just be able to be there for yourself and others. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll see you back here next time.